You're listening to the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe, a podcast of curated conversations with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development. Get ready for inspiring interviews, educational lessons, and thought-provoking discussions that will challenge you to execute something new and innovative that will drive results in your organization. And now, here's Dr. Tanya Lowe.
Hello. You're listening to episode 30 of the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Using my results-driven philosophy of strategy, leadership, teams, and customer experiences, I help organizations develop their best kept secret, their human capital. This podcast is designed to expand the conversation with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and develop what it really takes to create, develop, and maintain results-driven and high-performing organizations. Our guest today is Eric Hernandez, Chief Operations Officer of Peachtree Health. Eric has held management and C-suite roles in a variety of health-focused organizations throughout the California area. He is passionate about healthcare advocacy, volunteering, and community engagement, specifically within underserved communities. Eric received his bachelor's in business administration with emphasis on management from Mount St. Mary's University. During his free time, you can find him exploring new locations with his dog. I have a dog too, Eric. Nice. Reading for personal development books and spending quality time with his family. Eric is a leader and a catalyst for change. I found a quote from his LinkedIn and it reads, "As a Latino leader in the healthcare field, I understand the challenges that we face when entering leadership roles, especially as executive leaders and or medical providers. My goal is to be part of the change that addresses the underrepresentation of Latinos in healthcare leadership and increase diversity in medical provider roles." Guys, you're in for a treat. Eric, welcome to RDO.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Lowe. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to get into this conversation with you today. Eric, you have a strong background in management and operations. Share with us some of the leadership lessons that you have learned along your journey to COO.
I always stay true to three lessons that I've learned over my time. Main one of them being lead through your team. Right? A lot of times we, as leaders, as we grow, we believe that we've gone into this role to create the change and we single-handedly need to create that change, right? But we fail to listen to the team that's actually doing the work. And many that have grown through the ranks, like myself, we forget that we were there and we had that mindset at one point, right? We know the job, we know what's going on. Listen to us. So listen to your team. I've also learned that collaboration is really, really key in success, wherever you go. Whether it be, professionally or your personal life, right? With friends or with family or at work, it's always important to collaborate with them. Mm-hmm. At work specifically, I've learned that when you're rolling new things out, when you're thinking about new ideas, right? You need to collaborate and hear about how everybody else is going to interpret that idea, what ideas they have to enhance that idea, and even if they feel that that idea is something that should be not an idea, right? Which is common. And that's the importance of diversity, making sure that there's so many people in there and you grow from it, right? Because there's going to be multiple players impacted by a change that can be more well received if you're collaborating with multiple teams, kind of like an integrated team format.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would say embrace change. I learned that in leadership, you need to constantly embrace change. And I learned real quickly that if you don't embrace change, you get left behind. Right? In order for us to grow, in order for us to improve, we need to embrace the change that is our community, embrace the change that is our customer, our patients, our employees, the environment, the politics, the cultures that we're around, right? So that we can always provide the service that we need to provide, not the one we want to provide.
Oh, that is so good. Lead through your team. And, that was a leadership lesson that I learned a lot later in my career. And unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way. But once I learned the lesson, I really valued team a lot more. I really, really valued it. So I definitely appreciate hearing you say that. And then collaboration, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, you don't get that that collaborative spirit. So, and then embracing change is all around.
It is.
It is all around us. A lot of change since the pandemic, and a lot more change to come. So I think those are some great leadership lessons, everyone. So I hope you wrote those down and that you think about how you can use those in your organization. So Eric, what do you believe are the biggest challenges that leaders face today, and what's needed to eliminate or minimize those changes? So like we said, you got to embrace change, but what do you feel like the biggest challenges are? Because there's been a lot of change.
There has been a lot of change, and that's actually a great question. You mentioned, we went through a pandemic, epidemic, and the changes that we thought, or the challenges we thought we had before it, are completely different to what we have now, right? And it's enhancing that. It's a whole different world. We emerged a whole different world, a whole different culture, a whole different work population. And in reality, I think adapting to change, going back to that, is one of the biggest challenges right now. Because challenge right now is coming quicker than we ever saw it, right? Something as simple of working from home or not working from home. Adapting to that challenge is big. And then we have to incorporate managing diversity and inclusion, right? That's really big. And in my trajectory as leadership, I've held that true to me, because we need to manage diversity and inclusion, make sure that we are providing the people what they need, but we also look like the people, and we provide the services the way they need it, whatever we're doing, right? And then enhancing that a little bit further is building and retaining our talent, right? That is super big, because so many times we say, well, you need to roll with the punches, right? Change is inevitable. Okay, that may be right, but how do we build them, right? How do we build them to adapt to that change? How do we build them to know that we need to diversify and be more inclusive, right? And how do we show them that we're trying to increase their human capital that then relates to retaining them as talent, because we're investing in them opposed to just what they do, right? One of the biggest challenges right now that I'm seeing is the ethical decision-making process. Leaders right now face a lot of ethical dilemmas that are increasingly interconnected, I would say, and socially conscious of what's going on in the world. To minimize this challenge, it takes a real in-depth conversation, taking a look at the culture that you're involved in, and they really should encourage open discussions, open dialogues, right? And these dialogues that are not led by C-suiters, right? Dialogues that are not read by supervisor hired. These are dialogues that need to be led by the people that are delivering the service, our frontline staff. And I'll be the first one to say, I think our frontline staff carry more value than a C-suite person, because they're the ones out there, right? With all that being said, tying it into how technology has changed, right? Making sure that you adapt to those challenges. I emphasize technology, and I'll use my role in healthcare. So in healthcare, we had to quickly adapt to moving from a mainly in-person level delivery of care to a telehealth. Right. And now that we're coming out of the pandemic and we're creating change, it's embracing that that's here to stay. And how do you adapt it to your regular operations, whether it's billing, workflows, provider expectations, et cetera, et cetera. And as I mentioned, expectations, I would lastly mention balancing stakeholder expectations and knowing who your stakeholders are, right? A lot of times your stakeholders can be shareholders, right? In FQHCs, like where I'm at, it's usually your patients, because we're providing them a service. It's your employees, it's your communities. So really balancing the expectations they have on you and you have on them. So in order to fix that, again, it comes down to the open dialogue, the transparency, the discussions you're having, and to a certain level, the professional and business related vulnerability that you put yourself in and the organization in to accept this change.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, you are talking my language. I want to go into, the talking to the people, having the dialogue with the people. Too many times, and I know during my career, too many times decisions were made at the top, and we never talked to people at other levels who can say, this is going to work, this isn't going to work, and this is why, because these things are happening that people at the C-suite level or the director level may not be aware of. And so it is important to have that dialogue, collect that data is what I tell people is, you got to collect the data. Who are you talking to? Stop giving people what you think they want. And that, is in alignment with your clients and your patients as well, and ask them what they want, collect the data, and then you can deliver that service a whole lot better. And then the technology and the training and managing DEI. I mean,
Yes.
I think we always knew that was it was a challenge, but I think during the social justice issues of 2020 really highlighted it even more, and really called organizations on the carpet of, hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Right on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I love all of that. So guys, if you're listening, make sure that you wrote these things down. And if you're not having these dialogues with your staff at all levels, please start today. You'll find out something, I guarantee, that will be of value. So you're no stranger to leadership. You've held many leadership roles in your career. How important is it to have a strong team? You talked about leading through your team. So how important is it to have a strong team? And what are some things that you do or have done to cultivate and maintain a strong team?
So that question, I can break it apart into different aspects of it. So let's talk about how important that it is to have a strong team. It's very important, right? Mm-hmm. And let's define what a strong team means, right? A strong team for me doesn't necessarily mean someone that can do the job, right? A lot of times we mistake that they can do the job. That means that's the best person. Mm-hmm. My mindset is, can I help you grow and train you to do the job? And do you have the more soft delivery skills that we actually need to deliver it effectively? Yeah. Right? So when I say define a strong team, right, a resume can be beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that the body attached to the resume is going to deliver the expectations that we have. So big picture, right? I think it's important that when you bring individuals that even if they don't know the role, that they live the organization or the values, the goals, they connect in some way. This way they can lead through example, through compassion and empathy, right? To what the service we're leading. Some things that I particularly like to do to cultivate them is give them a seat at the table. As we talk, you'll maybe see that my leadership style is collaborative, communicative, transparent. And when I give our frontline staff, and that doesn't mean managers or supervisors, that means the people actually doing the work. A seat at the table where decisions are being made so that they know that their voice is being heard, ensure that they influence change that's coming, they influence progress, they influence improvement. Those are big things, right? As far as my manager team and my leadership team, I always like to, listen to what they love to do and what they hate to do, right? And many times we're taught to, you go through school and you're taught, well, focus on their strengths and enhance their strengths. My philosophy is, well, how do I help them with their weaknesses? Because if it's a strength, they know how to do it. I'm not going to not engage in it, but I'm going to look at their weaknesses and see what I can do to increase, again, their human capital for whether it stays with me or wherever they go further, right? And make their weaknesses into strengths. I'll give you an example of some stuff that I've done. I enjoy and love promoting from within. I know that promoting from within sometimes comes with its added challenges, because this is maybe an individual that's growing into leadership and you promoted them because they know the job. That's a strength, right? But their weakness is they haven't been leaders before.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we guide them towards finding their leadership style? Not management style, leadership styles. There's difference,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So I focus with them, and I really do like concentrated one-on-ones. I do my research on books, articles, stuff that I can improve them for, and I make a commitment to my team. My commitment can sometimes get me in trouble. I'll say that, because it's a 50-50 route, and they need to be engaged in it. And when I promote, I let them know, hey, here's a development plan. Here's areas we need to work on. What area do you think is more emphasis here? And how do we do that? And how can I help you? So here's what I can commit to. Let me find you different resources, books, articles, podcasts, LinkedIn learnings, which I've done that can help you grow as a leader, right? And then incorporate that, because I need to teach them how to be a leader, because I know they know how to do the job. You know?
Oh my God. Guys, you all need an Eric Hernandez in your organization, because he is spouting the truth. My biggest challenge when I go into companies is they want me to fix people, but they've not really spent the time developing them. Or, they'll call me in and say, this is the last chance for this person. They promoted them. They were great over here, but they're struggling over here. Did you prepare them? Or are you setting them up for failure? And so I love focusing on the soft skills, creating that development plan, and then connecting them with those resources is very important. The World Economic Forum, I think I'm saying that right, they put out a report, and I'm going to be speaking on some of the things in a couple of weeks about the reskilling and upskilling employees for 2025, which is not very far away from here. And soft skills is a big component of that. And so, if you are working with your folks and helping them to develop their soft skills, because they're hard skills, they know that they can probably do that stuff in their sleep, but it's the people stuff, it's the leadership stuff. And I really like helping them develop their weaknesses, because we hear that oftentimes, just focus on your strengths, but then it keeps you stuck in your comfort zone, right? And so when I focus on my weaknesses, then I can grow and add more skills than I never thought like, oh my God, I used to hate that. Now I'm doing better at that. So I love that. It is important to have a strong team, and not just to call the plays, but it sounds like you're right there in the center of the team, helping them and guiding them.
Yeah, it builds trust. And when you bring collaboration, that's a big factor of effective leadership for me. Making sure that I've built the trust and collaboration, while also understanding that I have a role, right? And I have to educate them on what my role is and how they contribute to the overall organization. You mentioned one thing that I wanted to kind of point out. Many times we talk about coaching and we say, oh, this is the last straw for them, right? Sometimes we're so quick to say, that person can't do the job. They're within their first 90 days. It's easier to term them now than wait 6 months. My thing is, well, we hired them for a reason. We haven't given them the ability to show us they can do it. And have we given them the resources? So with my leadership team, they send me like, documents, stuff like that, say terminations. I'm like, well, where did you teach them?
Yeah.
How did they know this, right? Before we got here, opposed to going straight here. And even when I deliver a discipline, I always, go in there with the tone of, hey, this is how we got here. This is yet another educational tool for you to create change, right? This is my commitment to you to let you know and give you feedback on an ongoing basis that there's a change that needs to be done, and a commitment of how I can support you, right? Now, if it leads to a termination, right, it's like, how have we supported them and given them the resources to prevent that? And more often than not in my career, as I grew, I noticed that we had not done that.
Nope, it doesn't. And that is across the board that is from state to state and even in other countries. I see that happening, and we've got to get better with developing our human capital. They are the most important asset in any organization. So, we talked about leadership challenges, and I share with you, my challenge early on in my career was teams, because I was always a team of one. And so I didn't really have to embrace the team concept. It was, hey, here's this manual. Can you turn it into a program? I was very good with the collaboration piece, but it was like, hey, I'm in the Super Bowl all by myself. But the reality is you can't run an organization or a department with that mindset. And like I said, I had to learn that the hard way. So can you tell us about your biggest leadership challenge and how you identified it, how you conquered it, and then how you help other people when you see that, like, that was me? How do you help other people with that?
That's a good one. And I'll tie it into the quote you gave earlier, right? Because that's one of my biggest challenges, right? I really want to enhance what leadership looks like for not just the Latino community, but people of color, and really have them be represented. Yeah. And I say that because when I think about my biggest leadership challenge, it was, finding my voice. Finding my voice in a room where I would say I initially believed I did not belong. Mm-hmm. Right? So the imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Right? I would notice that in certain professional settings, I would hold back. I wouldn't speak up. Right. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was due to me being surrounded by individuals that were like highly accomplished. They had higher leadership roles, or they have been in leadership roles for longer than me. And I would hesitate to speak up, fearing that my opinions or contributions wouldn't be valued, mm-hmm. right? Or respected as a whole. It was like that self-doubt that really hindered my ability to expand and grow. And in some of my first leadership roles, it was evident, right? So overcoming that, I think there was a lot of stuff that I needed to do. And it started with my self-reflection of who I am and why I'm in that table, why I'm in that room, right? I did something to get myself in the room, right? Which means I deserve to be there, right? Which means I delivered something that made me be there. But then also have self-compassion for myself, right? Self-compassion is big. Also, taking those proactive steps that are needed to overcome those insecurities. Because really what those are insecurities that we have self-instilled on ourselves because of what the world has told us. Yeah. Right? So the first thing that I had to do is acknowledge it. And it took some time to acknowledge that that's what I was facing. Yeah. And a big part of it was that I didn't want to acknowledge that that's what I was facing. Right? It goes back to me now being big on diversity and inclusion and creating this change. I had at one point accepted the imposter syndrome because I believed that was my role. Yes, I had been placed in that room for a reason. However, what I had to deliver had to be, you can say, reduced from what I actually can deliver to make sure I can maintain my seat in that room. So when I say finding my voice, it's really, that's my voice. Like, how can I create change and all that stuff? Realizing that, it really helped me realize that my doubts were necessarily not a reflection of my actual abilities or qualifications. To sum that one up, right? Then I had to work on changing my mindset. And how do I change that? That's the, we say embrace change, grow with change. Changing ourselves is the hardest thing to do.
Yes, it is.
Put that out there, right?
Yeah.
But I had to start with my mindset, focusing on what my strengths were, what I had achieved, my personal value that I had lowered myself because I had accepted this, right? And value my voice as far as what I bring to the table. If everybody else in this table has a voice and can speak up, why can't I if I'm at the same table? So that also meant getting out my comfort zone, right? We spoke about that a little while ago, staying in your comfort zone, you know what you know. So you have to get out your comfort zone. Gradually, I started to, recognize the importance of my voice, perspectives, realizing my unique experiences, not just in the professional world, but my life experiences that can create change for future leaders or future organizations that, are going in. And ask questions, because there will be times that well, let me not ask a question because then I'm going to be seen like, oh, it doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right back to imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Right. So I had to really get over that. And I had to read a lot of books of self-reflection and how to build yourself and enhance yourself to have your voice heard.
Mm-hmm.
That really helped me.
Yeah.
I will say, to teach others similar challenges, I pride myself on building my team on diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I work in FQHCs, which is we serve the underserved communities, the underserved populations, communities that otherwise wouldn't engage care. The reality of this, the majority of this population are POCs, people of color, right? So how do we deliver a service to people where they feel comfortable coming in? We have to start by tailoring it to their needs.
Yeah.
And then tailoring ourselves, our hiring practices, our retention practices, our onboarding practices, our policies and procedures to that, right? It's believing in empowering and openness and honesty. So I really talk to people that I mentored on communication and the value of your voice, right?
Yeah.
The importance of communication, the importance of asking questions, and the importance of understanding your value for why you are in the room. You have worked yourself up, you have delivered something to be there. And there was one individual that I recently spoke to about this, and they told me, well, I'm the token.
Oh, I've heard that so many times.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had a real good conversation about that. And I said, how do we turn that around? How do we turn that belief around? Because it's unfortunate to say that there are instances where that might be the truth, right? But that's also our window. You may have brought me in for the token, but I'm going to teach you something, right? So I do a lot of self-empowerment and education to my teams, building them how to overcome, really acknowledging their strengths, their benefits, and teaching them how to speak on them.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. This is so good, because I believe a lot of people struggle with finding their voice and using their voice, and kind of getting, I call them the gremlins, not listening to the gremlins in their head, or imposter syndrome. And, I think it's fear, there's a lot of fear, helping them get on the other side of that fear. I deserve to be here. So if you're listening to this episode and you can relate to what Eric just shared, I want you to know that you deserve to be right where you are. Use your voice, practice some self-compassion. You got to the table. So we already know you deserve to be there. So practice that self-compassion and use your voice. Be a contributor, add value. And I've met a lot of people who have held back because of fear. They didn't think their voices were going to be heard, or they were shut down. So I'm so glad to hear that you're developing people to share their voice and get on the other side of that. Well, I'm just a token, so I'm here at the table, but you're at the table. So you're at the table. You don't just get to sit there. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been talking a lot about change and challenges and teams and leadership. So I want to ask you about this. We've talked about a lot of change. The workplace has changed. It's no longer black and white. It's LGBTQ. It's accessibility. It's religion or no religion. It's multi-generational, which is, when I go into companies now, that's something that a lot of organizations are struggling with. And it's multicultural. Many organizations struggle with creating true, diverse, inclusive, and equitable organizations. So we just talked a little bit about, your challenge to really bring that to the table. What recommendations would you give organizations on how they can create a culture of diversity and be more of an ally when it comes to diverse hiring and advancement opportunities? I know that was a lot. But
I think it's something that we need to talk about, though, right? And the community can talk about more. And it starts by developing an inclusive hiring process. Right? That's big. Review and revise hiring practices, advancement opportunities, implementing one thing that I love and I like to use, blind resume. So I don't know if you've worked on that, but implementing like a blind resume screening technique to focus on the skills and qualifications rather than the personal characteristics, right? Rather than I know that area code or, oh, that name stands out, right? It's you just literally see the qualifications, right? And something that I'm trying to incorporate into my hiring managers here when the resumes come in, block out the name, block out the number, block out the emails, right? Just look at the content. Talk to that, right? And then you have to really look at the goals and metrics and how are they established on diversity, right? Because a goal or a metric that works for one area may not work for the other area.
Right.
They need to be measurable, be able to track progress, and hold, keyword, the organization accountable, not the people, the organization, right? Because we're an organization as a whole, and we are, what's going to be reflective of what we want to lead, our value, or our missions as an organization, right? One of the biggest things is make sure that we have adequate and effective diversity and inclusion trainings, right? I'm a firm believer that while everyone has their own definition of what that may be.
You're right.
Everyone's backgrounds can give a different definition of what that may be or what that looks like, right? And within an organization, you have a variety of people, right? It's, multiple generations in a workplace, like you mentioned, multiple views, multiple backgrounds. So diversity needs to be tailored to engage each one of them. And the way you tailor that, it's really not a one-way tailored type thing. It's like a three-pronged approach, four-pronged approach.
Yes.
Tailor it, right? Because you need to tailor it for this group, for that group, for that group, which leads into the creation of like, I don't know if you know what ERGs are, but they're like employee resource groups.
Yes. Yep.
Right? I love that. I love that concept. I've seen it get done, and they bring together employees from diverse backgrounds, and they really foster a sense of community.
They do.
Right? They provide the support, offer even networking opportunities, and these groups become like a platform for sharing experiences, adapting life changes, right? And valuable insights that someone outside of that group may have never heard, right? All of this can't happen if you don't ensure you have commitment from leadership.
Yes.
Right? So it starts from the top. From the top, we need to live, breathe what we are pushing out or what we want the organization to kind of adapt to, right? Because if not, why are we doing it? We're just working backwards, right?
Yeah. Just trying to check a box.
Exactly. Check a box because of current regulations, opposed to actually accepting the change that we need to do. And then, we can get into more specific things like, regular review policies and practices to ensure that they're diversified and verbiage is, accepting of all populations in the communities that we serve or in the world in general, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that, we engage in outreach and partnerships that foster our values, right? That foster what we're trying to push out. Sometimes there may be an organization that does this amazing job, but does not really connect to our mission and values. And how do we make sure that we still get what we want and adapt that, right? Opposed to accepting it because they do it best. Right? And then really ultimately promoting inclusive level behaviors for leadership, executive leadership and everything, allowing them to be inclusive in their teams, not dictating what their teams should look like, what the role should look like, letting them, be inclusive the way they see it being inclusive, and guiding them towards the mission, values, and goals of the organization. I think those will be the top ones that I would mention. It ties into, I'm really big, again, transparency, communication, diversity, inclusion. And when you tie all that in, an organization that can really tie all those in, I think it's just going to be an amazing organization to work for.
Absolutely. And the organizations that I've researched, they do that well. They do those things well. It's like, why do you like working here? I feel like I belong. I'm like, oh my God, like they do it well. And so I think it is, it's really important for leadership to embrace the changes and build, create this diversity within their organization. I was working with a client last year. She was going to speak somewhere up north, and she was speaking on DEI in the insurance industry. And they were saying, well, we just don't know where to find diverse people. I was like, really? Are they saying that in 2022? And so, we came up with some strategies, for her to work with them, and they were just amazed. And I think as people of color, it's like, really, are they saying this? But if they haven't been, I don't want to say pushed, encouraged to look at, we don't look like the world here, but we're serving a population we don't look like. Like, we need to make that a priority. And so, so she's working with them and helping them to understand where they can find diverse talent, because diverse talent is out there. And it goes back to something you said earlier about just the conversations, embracing diversity, garnering a variety of ideas. So it helps you get outside of that box with your thinking and think about things that you've not thought about before. And that's, age, gender, it's all of, we tend to limit diversity to just race, but there's a whole list of things that when it comes to diversity that we can talk about that have an impact on the workplace. So, this is good stuff. Eric, we could go on forever, but I know you've got to get back to work, because I have one final question for you.
Sure.
Ask everyone this question. So what are you reading that we should be reading?
Well, I just came across a book like last week. We're finding books for a team member on how to do this, right? And I came one that's called The Struggle, the Gift of Struggle. It's by Bobby Herrera. It's a quick read. I think it was like 130 something pages that I just saw.
Okay.
I literally just finished it over the weekend, or last night actually. And it talks about how our life struggles impact the way we lead. Loved it. It has a story about how when he was a kid on a bus, and his brother played sports but couldn't go into the restaurant where the rest of the team was eating. So they were having their, I believe, burritos on the bus. And that had already became normal for them, because they felt that's where they belong. Right. And if they felt they didn't belong in there, and there was embarrassment. But then there was one person, their coach, I forgot the name, but he came in and says, allow me to buy you this. And in return, all I ask is you do this for a kid in your future. And he goes into breaking it apart, and then there's questions for you to how to evaluate, and how that taught him to push himself, to not accept the status quo. Yeah. To not be afraid to be at a table that you think you don't belong.
I needed this book 2 months ago. I needed this book 2 months ago. I was working with the client, and as a matter of fact, I know I'm going to add it to my reading list, and I'm going to suggest that they get that book. Woo! We have been chatting with Eric Hernandez, Chief Operations Officer of Peachtree Health. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit the show notes page to see how to connect with Eric, and be sure to grab a copy of Results Driven Organizations, the 4 Keys to a High Performance Workplace. Use the link in the show notes, and be sure to grab our special gift to you for being a valued listener at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Be sure to review the show notes for the resources mentioned, and don't forget to grab your free gift available at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time, we hope